Hi, everyone. It's Kate Byers, founder of Corporate Women Unleashed. I wanted to come in real quick today and talk about boundaries. One of the things that we hear a lot, especially with what's going on now, where we can't necessarily leave our houses as much as we'd like to, is how to establish a good routine of boundaries. And if you're a high achiever, you're probably used to creating a boundary, and then that boundary is somehow imposed upon. And before you know it, you find yourself frustrated, whether it's with your spouse, your kids, and mostly in the workplace, right? Someone's sort of overstepping into what you need is to protect your time. And so how do you really keep those boundaries well established? And one of the things that we find is that one of the biggest mistakes that highly successful people do is they don't create a boundary that's dynamic. And I know that sounds weird because it's like, if it's a boundary, it's not a brick wall. It is a marker that says, this is my boundary. Here's where I'm drawing a line in the sand, but I may choose to move that line later on if I so choose. And there's freedom in that, which is what most of us are looking for, right? If you're looking to play more and work less, or in fact, most of the people, I think most of the women we work with, it's not necessarily always just working less, it's just having control over your schedule. What's really important is that you remember is that boundaries have to be dynamic, especially at more senior levels in your career, but even in the mid levels. You want to make sure that a boundary is not something that's hard and fast, like I only work to a certain part of the day, or I never travel, or I never do this, or I'll only do this. Because what happens is we negotiate these, and even with amazingly supportive leadership teams or a boss or company culture, they can approve that boundary and then it falls backwards. Because guess what? We're working with humans, and we're working with companies that are in a lot of upheaval, and we're working with a team that maybe you have a new team member or somebody quits, and all of a sudden this boundary that you had established evaporates because life happens. Okay. So the best way to create a boundary is this. One is you have to understand what that boundary is trying to achieve. Because if you say, well, I just want to work less, well, is that really what you want? Because we work with women all day long who tell us that. And then when they start working with us, they realize it's not about working less. It's just about getting their needs met in a different way. I want to be have a higher level of connection with my family, or I want to start taking better care of my health, and I'm not honoring my health. And I think we've all had that experience where you've had an all day Saturday with nothing to do. Did you go work out? Did you spend really quality time with your kids? Maybe not. So just because you have more time doesn't mean you're actually going to do the things that you want to be doing. So the first thing you have to remember with boundaries is, what is it you're trying to achieve with this boundary? And it's not just more time. So you've got to get beyond that definition, because having more time doesn't give you higher quality of life, ever. It's knowing what to do at that time, and it's knowing what it is you really want. So once you have clarity on that, then it's saying, well, now I can make a dynamic boundary around my workload. Because let's just say, for example, I'm like, sorry, I've got something flashing here. I want to make sure you can hear me. Let's just say, for example, I am not spending, like I have 2 little boys. And let's just say I feel like I'm not spending enough time with my little boys. So I might want to put up a boundary around my workload about not working on the weekends or not working as late at night, so I can really spend some good quality time with them. But if for the most part, I'm spending good quality time with my kids, or I'm just really connecting with them amazingly well, like my kids are older now, they're 10 and 12. So connecting with them does not necessarily mean sitting down on the floor all day playing Legos. I can connect with them in a lot of different ways that are not intensely time-based. Then if I'm going to work a little bit late, then I might be okay with that. Or if someone says, hey, we got something for you to do, and it's going to take more time out of your personal life, I might be perfectly fine with that. And I'm willing to move that boundary for that project, or move that boundary for that week, or move that boundary for that individual. But there's other times where someone might say, hey, we've tapped you for this. It feels really good to my ego, or I'm super excited about this challenging opportunity. That I might say, you know what, I'd be happy to do that, but here's how it needs to look. So I'm creating a boundary around my time, or I'm creating a boundary around that connection I want to have with my kids, because maybe that's going to interfere with that connection that I have with them. Right? So that boundary is dynamic. I don't have a hard and fast, Kate stops working every day at 6 o'clock. I certainly have a general, work environment that I like to create for myself, but I'm more than willing to flex in and out of that as long as my needs are getting met. And then I can have flexible boundaries. And there's times I'm going to be telling people, you know what? I don't think I can do that for you right now. I may have to do that for you later because I'm putting in a boundary. And then there's other times I'm like, yeah, absolutely. My plate's totally cool. Like, let's do this, or I'm willing to take on some extra. But because I'm very grounded in the fact that my boundaries are flexible and dynamic, and I know what they're protecting because I know what I really value, which is, connection with my family, having an extraordinary level of health, having some time to do some things that make me more well-rounded. So I'm not just all work, no play, dull girl. And as those things are happening, and they're happening in a very dynamic way throughout my life, and I'm feeling like that I'm really fulfilled, I don't have to keep a hard and fast boundary. Does that make sense? I can choose to work more. I can choose to work less. And I feel really confident communicating that. And we'll talk about that maybe next on the next broadcast. I feel really confident communicating that to others because I know exactly what that boundary is for. And that's a real big one for women. In fact, that would be a great thing for our next broadcast, is to talk about communicating boundaries. Because I think women, men have this problem too, but women much so more than men get really wrapped up in what are people going to think about me? If I say this, what's going to happen? This will reflect bad on me, blah, blah, blah. So we'll talk about that next time because that's a whole nother topic. But the biggest mistake I see is that because we're not exactly sure what that boundary is for, is we want to create these hard and fast boundaries around our time. And then what happens is, let's just say you say, well, from now on, I'm not going to answer my phone after 7 o'clock at night. Does that necessarily get you the glorious family time or onto the treadmill or the Peloton? Is it doing what you want it to do or not? Because a lot of times what we find is it's not, or maybe it did, and you're like, oh, this was so great. Like I never touched my phone after 7, but now I have this new boss who calls me every night at 9. But now I have this new project that's that's demanding that I check emails, before I go to bed because now I'm working with someone on the other side of the world. And there, that hard and fast boundary just got blown up. Do you see what I'm saying? And so now I'm not going to have great time with my kids because now I'm going to have to be on emails with, whatever, Asia Pacific or something at a certain time of day or a certain time of night. So that's why that hard and fast boundary doesn't work, because we don't know what we're protecting. And so if we don't know what we're protecting, then we can't flex to continue to protect it and then move things differently. And you guys are probably finding this right now, right? Like the fact that a lot of us don't have that, that separation between work and home. Like if you're used to going into an office and then you had a commute, like that's where you disconnected and that's where you got your mind together and that's where you got ready to walk in the door. And if you're not used to working from home, now there's no limit to how much you can work. And you've got, family, people, dogs, cats, whatever it is you have all over you. And so learning how to create some more dynamic boundaries where today you may be more available, today you may be less available, tomorrow you may be more available, and really communicating that ongoing so people understand your expectations and what they can expect or get from you is critical. So, and we find this to be probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks for so many highly successful people is understanding how to create boundaries, because either you have no boundaries whatsoever, and that usually comes from the fact that you tried to create them and it didn't work because you didn't know how to get it to work. And it failed because life changed. And then you're like, well, what's the point of having boundaries? Like a lot of women will say, I'd rather just work all the time because anytime I try to take downtime, I try to take vacation, I try to take a night off, it just blows up in my face. And either A, it wasn't fulfilling, or B, I just had so much more on my plate the next day. It just totally killed me. Well, that's not an effective boundary, right? Like it's got to be dynamic, but you got to it's not, I'm just shoving this off for tomorrow. It's like actually putting a boundary around your time. So putting a boundary around your time is not shoving off work for the next day. It's putting a boundary around your time, like what you are willing and not willing to do. Does that make sense? And then if you have a really strong why, you understand why you're putting that boundary in place. Now you can be flexible with it so you don't get the reputation of, the girl who won't do whatever, right? Like you're just someone who's like, yeah, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. And you're doing the same thing, by the way, with your family, right? If you have family or roommates or whoever you live with, spouse, partner, you're saying, yeah, maybe I could be there for dinner. Maybe I can't. Let's talk about that. Or no, I will always be there for dinner or I won't. You've got to decide how that works, obviously, with your family dynamic. But if you're more comfortable about what you're protecting, then you can be more flexible with your family as well. This is what I am available for. This is what I'm not available for. Ooh, I'm totally willing to put this aside and come out there and be with you right now. Or, yeah, you know what? I can't right now, but I know I did that yesterday. Today, I'm not available to be as flexible. So really understanding that when boundaries are dynamic, they're in your control. There's freedom in that. You're not trying to hold on to something and grip to something. You're just knowing today there's going to be a boundary, tomorrow there may not be. And as long as you know what need you're trying to protect or what you're trying to create the boundary for, what that goal is, you can get that goal met in a lot of different ways, which means now the boundary really can live and breathe and be dynamic. Does that make sense? So I hope this is helpful. It's been a couple of weeks since I've jumped in here to chat with everyone. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're thriving. I hope you're healthy. And if you have any questions, please put them below. If you'd like to see some more free trainings that we do, we'll also link that below this video and pass it along. There may be someone else out there that you know is, I'm sure, having this conversation of how do I get better boundaries in place. Please pass this on to them, tag them, or send it to them because this could be helpful for them as well.